While most Territorians are well aware of the bombing of Darwin that occurred 77 years ago, the rest of the country was largely left in the dark at the time. As part of a curious investigation, reporter Mitchell Abram takes a look into why the bombing of Darwin seems to be such a little-known part of Australia's history.
It's a day that marks one of the darkest periods in Darwin's history, the first of some 64 Japanese bombing raids on the tiny frontier town. But with more bombs dropped here than on Pearl Harbor, Darwin historian Dr. Tom Lewis wondered why the raids seem to have been left to the history books.
I was a young bloke in the 1970s and I didn't know anything about Darwin, but then again, I was in Tasmania.
While researching his book Carrier Attack, Dr. Lewis and his co-author Peter Ingman found it was the history books that were part of the problem.
The history books being used after the war were the same as the history books before the war. The Australian Education Departments didn't tear up the old books and throw them away. They kept using them.
As the decades pass, the notoriety of the 19th of February slowly grows. A veteran of the bombing, she didn't find out about what her father had gone through until 70 years later.
First understanding of what happened in Darwin was in 2012, when I visited for the 70th commemoration of the bombing.
Awareness that inspired her to start researching and eventually penning a memoir based on her father's experience.
Kept moving in the same place, they kept landing in the same place. Why don't I know about this? Why don't the people of Australia know about this?
She blames censorship as part of the reason.
Letters coming out of Darwin were censored. They were slashed with razor blades so that people's loved ones were receiving letters that were just pieces of cut up paper.
77 years on, the study of Australia at war is a mandatory subject for school students across the country. But the bombing of Darwin remains an option, with most curriculum authorities suggesting it as a significant event of study, but not mandating it. With so few Australians directly impacted, Dr. Lewis says you can understand why Darwin is overlooked.
It was an enormous war. 50 to 60 million people died. So you've got to fit in an enormous conflict into a small space in terms of the curriculum.
But in Darwin, where stark evidence remains, it's a tragedy that will always hit home. Mitchell Abram, ABC News, Darwin.
Check the weather now. Here's Nate Byrne.
Most of the country is looking fairly cloud-free at the moment. A bit of storm activity across the north and what's left of a frontal system moving through eastern New South Wales. But just offshore, tropical cyclone Oma spinning well off the coast at this stage. And it's not expected to make a coastal crossing. It's likely to turn back towards the southeast long before it does. But it's pushing some very hazardous surf conditions into the east coast. South of the Capricornia coast in Queensland, warnings are already current for today and tomorrow. You may see some of those swells reaching northern New South Wales as well. We're expecting waves up to 5 metres on Wednesday, coinciding with a king tide, so we'll keep an eye on that. Meanwhile, in the north of the country, lots of heat with severe and extreme heatwave conditions and severe fire danger today for the Ashburton Inland in Western Australia. Very high fire danger on both sides of the country. Meanwhile, in terms of rainfall, it's a fairly dry day. A little bit of storm activity through parts of the north, just extending down into Western Australia along a trough there later. Bit of wet weather for eastern New South Wales and for the west of Tasmania as well. Looking ahead to tomorrow, the rainfall picture doesn't really change very much. It looks very similar to today. We'll be keeping our eye on tropical cyclone Oma, of course, as those really big swells start. For the capitals tomorrow, it's a mostly sunny day for Brisbane, getting to 33. A shower or two still for Sydney, 25 there. 29 with clear skies in Canberra, 22 for Melbourne. Hobart, you've got a possible shower developing. 21 will be the top for you. 24 and fine in Adelaide, a sunny 33 on the way for Perth. And Darwin, a partly cloudy day, 34 degrees.
That's ABC News for now. I'm Ros Childs. Thanks for joining us.